It was just past 2 a.m. over the restless waters of the Persian Gulf when the roar of 12 U.S. fighter jets, F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs, punched through the night sky in tight formation, executing a lightning-fast coordinated strike that would shake the region to its core. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a show of force. This was a real mission, a classified operation carried out under the highest levels of secrecy, greenlit after weeks of rising tensions and intelligence pointing toward a major threat emerging from inside Iranian territory. For months, satellite imagery had shown unusual movement, mobile launchers being transported at odd hours, underground bunkers being reinforced, and advanced radar systems deployed near strategic oil infrastructure. The U.S. intelligence community warned that something big was coming. And then, all at once, Tehran made a move, deploying a long-range surface-to-surface missile system near the Strait of Hormuz aimed directly at international shipping lanes and U.S. naval forces operating nearby. That was the red line. The Pentagon knew it couldn't afford to wait for diplomacy to buy time. Action was the only option left. Within minutes of confirmation, U.S. Central Command activated Operation Black Phantom, a mission specifically crafted for rapid suppression of high-value enemy installations with overwhelming force. 12 of the deadliest fighter aircraft in the world were scrambled under radio silence from a U.S. airbase in the Middle East. Leading the charge were 4 F-22 Raptors armed with AM-120 AMRAAMs and precision-guided dams, built to destroy with surgical precision while staying invisible to enemy radar. Right beside them, 8 F-35 Lightning IIs carried out electronic warfare duties, jamming Iranian defenses and blinding their radar long enough to get in close, hit hard, and vanish before a response could even be mustered. The pilots were among the best in the world, seasoned veterans who had flown combat missions over Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. They knew the terrain. They knew the stakes. They were prepared for the worst and trained to dominate in the air. As the strike group crossed into contested airspace, Iranian early warning systems activated. But it was too late. The F-35s had already injected a digital virus into the network, scrambling targeting data and feeding false signals. Radar operators saw nothing but a blank screen or ghost targets, unaware that a fleet of American fighters was already above them. In less than 4 minutes, the first wave of dams was released from altitude. The shockwaves tore through hardened bunkers, communication towers, and missile launch platforms with pinpoint accuracy. Fireballs lit up the desert, and plumes of smoke rose for miles. Iranian anti-air defenses attempted to respond, but by the time they launched a single missile, the American jets had already pulled back into stealth formation and vanished behind friendly airspace. On the ground, confusion reigned. Iranian commanders scrambled to assess the damage, but chaos spread faster than information. In the aftermath, 5 key missile sites were confirmed destroyed, 2 mobile command vehicles obliterated, and 1 underground facility, believed to be housing critical drone technology, flattened entirely. And the U.S. suffered 0 losses. Not a single jet scratched. Not a single pilot injured. Back at the base, the aircraft landed in formation, cool and silent, like they had just returned from routine training exercise. But the world would soon come to understand that history had just shifted overnight. Iran never saw it coming. The precision, the speed, the overwhelming power, it was unmatched. In Washington, top military advisors briefed the president on the successful execution of the mission, while allied nations across Europe and the Middle East praised the United States for its decisive action in preventing what could have been a catastrophic escalation. Even adversaries took notice. Russia and China, both watching closely, saw firsthand the effectiveness of America's stealth strike capabilities when deployed without warning. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a message that when American interests and global security are threatened, the U.S. will respond with unmatched force and flawless execution. The F-22s and F-35s, flying in perfect coordination, demonstrated why air superiority remains the cornerstone of U.S. global dominance. Their stealth, speed, and lethality make them untouchable in the skies, and deadly when ordered to strike. This mission showcased how far the U.S. has come infusing real-time intelligence, cutting-edge aviation technology, and elite pilot training into a single unstoppable force. From satellite surveillance to the pilots pulling GS in the cockpit, every piece moved in harmony, and the result was devastating for the enemy. As analysts reviewed the mission, they confirmed that not only were Iranian air defenses overwhelmed, but their ability to strike back was crippled for months to come. Intelligence sources even suggested that some of Iran's top missile engineers were taken out in the blast, setting their weapons program back by years. News outlets around the globe tried to piece together what had happened, but only fragments were confirmed. Grainy satellite images, vague government statements. But one thing was clear: America had struck, and it had done so with surgical precision and overwhelming force. For the pilots, this was another night on duty. For the military planners, it was a successful execution of a doctrine decades in the making. And for America's enemies, it was a terrifying reminder that when 12 U.S. fighter jets launch at once, without warning, there's no hiding, no escaping, and no surviving. The future of warfare is already here, and the U.S. leads it from the skies. While the immediate success of the precision strike sent shockwaves across the region, the real battle was just beginning. Not in the skies, but in the aftermath. Inside the Pentagon, analysts monitored dozens of live feeds from satellites, drones, and AWACS aircraft still circling the zone, collecting real-time intelligence as the smoke cleared from Iranian territory. What they saw confirmed their boldest expectations. Not only were key military assets destroyed, but communication across Iranian military sectors was collapsing. Jammers from the initial strike had short-circuited internal networks, cutting commanders off from their field units. This wasn't just a decapitation strike. It was strategic chaos by design. The 12 U.S. jets had acted as a scalpel, cutting the head off a growing threat before it could speak, think, or retaliate. By 5 a.m., additional confirmation came in. Multiple underground missile silos were now smoldering wreckage, with seismic sensors detecting structural collapse beneath reinforced facilities. Iran's mobile radar stations had either been vaporized or rendered blind by the electronic storm unleashed by the F-35s. And across the region, U.S. allies from Israel to Saudi Arabia quietly nodded in relief. The message was clear: America would not allow another destabilizing force to gain the upper hand. Not in this critical region, not under the watch of the most advanced air fleet on Earth. But even with the strike complete, the mission was far from over. A second wave of surveillance drones, including RQ-170 Sentinels and MQ-9 Reapers, were deployed to ensure no retaliatory moves were made. The skies were filled not with chaos, but with calm dominance, the type that only comes when air superiority is absolute. Iranian forces attempted to scramble jets in the hours after the assault, but it was symbolic at best. They had no radar lock, no target, no warning. Their skies had been punched through without resistance, and their bases now lay in ruin. Inside Iran's high command, panic set in. Orders were shouted across disconnected lines. Generals debated whether this was just the beginning of a full-scale war. But back in Washington, the decision was already made. This wasn't about regime change or occupation. It was about neutralizing a growing threat before it metastasized into global instability. The message was loud, clear, and terrified every hostile regime watching. Cross the line, and America will answer before you even realize the mistake. The success of the strike also validated years of military investment in stealth technology, precision weaponry, and electronic warfare capabilities. The F-22 and F-35, sometimes questioned by critics for their high cost, had just justified every penny by proving they could fly into the world's most offended zones and walk away untouched. The Raptors, with their unmatched agility and speed, delivered their payload with brutal efficiency. The Lightning IIs, acting as both hunter and hacker, bent the digital battlefield to America's will. For many watching inside the military establishment, this strike marked a turning point. It was no longer about how many planes you could send, but how invisible, coordinated, and intelligent they were. Numbers didn't win the night. Technology and training did. Meanwhile, media coverage across the globe tried to catch up. Footage leaked of massive explosions lighting up the desert, intercepted radio chatter between stunned Iranian soldiers, and the sonic booms that had shattered windows miles away from the blast zone. Social media lit up with theories, fear, and awe. The hashtag stealth strike trended within hours. Yet, official confirmation from the Pentagon remained minimal. A brief statement acknowledged U.S. air activity in defense of Allied interests, but the silence said more than any press release ever could. This wasn't a show. This was power in motion. Behind the scenes, cyber teams continued to battle, ensuring Iranian systems remained disrupted, rerouting data, and scrambling missile launch protocols in case any desperate retaliatory move was attempted. And while the fighters were back on the ground, fully refueled and rearmed, they remained on standby, ready to launch again if even a hint of escalation occurred. But none came. Not that day. Not the day after. Iran reeled, but did not strike back. Because it understood now, America had eyes everywhere, wings faster than sound, and precision that no bunker or border could hide from. Diplomats quietly opened back channels. The United Nations held emergency meetings. But those watching closely knew. This strike was a masterclass in modern air warfare, and the U.S. had just reminded the world who still ruled the skies. For the pilots involved, there was no fanfare, just a debriefing, the after-action reports, and the quiet satisfaction of a mission executed flawlessly. One of the squadron leaders, a veteran of multiple conflicts, remarked during his report, "They never saw us. Not once. We were ghosts. Ghosts with talons, armed with the sharpest claws the world had ever seen." This operation will be studied for years in military academies. The coordination between intelligence, electronic warfare, stealth aviation, and surgical strikes was nothing short of textbook perfect. And as more details emerge, the legend will only grow. The 12 jets that flew that night weren't just aircraft. They were symbols of American resolve, of capability backed by will, of peace enforced through unmatched strength. The world had watched, and now the message echoed across every continent. The U.S. does not bluff, does not wait, and does not miss. This strike, precise and devastating, was not just a response. It was a warning carved into the sand with the roar of afterburners and a flash of high-altitude bombs. And the world, once again, remembered why the American flag still flies the highest when the skies grow dark. As global headlines spun with speculation and silence stretched across the Iranian leadership's war rooms, inside the United States' most guarded command centers, a deeper strategic layer unfolded. The 12 U.S. fighter jets that ignited the strike weren't just part of a single retaliatory mission. They were the spearhead of an evolving doctrine. High-speed, multi-vector air dominance with artificial intelligence-backed decision-making and quantum-level encryption guiding every movement. The Pentagon had waited years for the right moment to reveal the full spectrum of its stealth strike capabilities. Not just the aircraft, but the symphony behind them. Unmanned stealth drones had mapped every inch of the target zone days in advance, feeding data to DARPA-enhanced processing nodes that predicted not only where the enemy assets would be, but when and why. Those 12 jets were guided by more than just radar. They flew with live battlefield AI, adjusting formations in the sky every second, reacting to real-time intelligence streamed through encrypted laser communication relays. To the average viewer, this was a strike. To the military insider, it was a demonstration of an integrated kill web system so advanced that even the enemy's best guess couldn't anticipate it. While the world saw explosions, the United States saw patterns, vulnerabilities, gaps in regional defenses, and leverage over future diplomatic negotiations. Inside Iran, the confusion and chaos gave way to internal mistrust. Communications between Revolutionary Guard factions were intercepted. Blame was already being assigned. How had the Americans known exactly where and when to strike? Some suspected betrayal. Others whispered that U.S. satellites had become too advanced. But the truth, chillingly, was even worse. The strike had been predicted based on behavior, logistical movements, and algorithmic analysis. There didn't need to be a mole when America could see your next move before you made it. By day 3, U.S. Navy ships had repositioned strategically across the Arabian Gulf, not in aggression, but in confidence. Iran, though angered, hesitated. Russia and China, who had invested heavily in Iran's military modernization, watched silently. They recognized this as a test of American readiness and reach. And though they did not publicly respond, they took notes, likely reevaluating their own defensive assumptions. America had just proven it could deliver an overwhelming blow in under 90 minutes. from over 1,000 miles away without losing a single jet or triggering escalation. Back in the United States, the pilots were debriefed individually and then in formation, their helmet cam footage analyzed frame by frame to extract every insight possible. One clip stood out, a squadron flying at low altitude, ducking beneath Iranian radar, only to rise at the perfect moment with weapons armed and locked. The cockpit audio was clean, professional, calm before impact, package delivered, exiting hot. Those 3 words would later become a symbol across the military community, a phrase of ruthless precision delivered with cold, unmatched clarity. Meanwhile, in Congress and the White House, briefings confirmed what the military had known all along. The U.S. Air Fleet remained decades ahead. In fact, this operation was just the public face. Behind the curtain, next-generation fighters like the NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance, were already in simulation, learning from this mission, evolving new protocols, and preparing to dominate future threats. Hypersonic weapons tested during the strike, but not fired, were tracked and retrieved, their telemetry revealing speeds and targeting potential that stunned even hardened generals. These weren't just tools of war. They were tools of policy, of balance, of deterrence. But this victory didn't breed arrogance. Inside the Air Force, Navy, and Space Force, there was no celebration, only recalibration. Maintenance crews worked double shifts. Refueling wings were redirected. Satellites repositioned to track new ripple effects from the strike. Because if there was one universal truth, it was this: a blow this powerful would not go unanswered forever. Somewhere, someone was already planning a counter. But the Pentagon knew that too. That's why the 12 jets weren't just equipped with stealth. They had recorded, jammed, and injected surveillance worms into every digital layer of the target zone. Iran's military systems were now partially blind, partially exposed, and entirely compromised. Over the next month, cyber divisions would extract terabytes of enemy data, strategic layouts, missile schematics, war room communications, without a single bullet being fired. It was warfare beyond the battlefield. And that's the lesson that echoed far beyond the Middle East. The skies may have quieted after the strike, but America's dominance had just entered a new, invisible phase. As allies praised the restraint and precision of the operation, enemies reeled with paranoia. No air defense seemed capable of halting the onslaught. No bunker deep enough. No radar sensitive enough. Because it wasn't just the aircraft, it was the ecosystem. Satellites that could track body heat from orbit. Submarines that launched drones from underwater. 21 raiders that hadn't even been revealed to the public, but were quietly being prepped for next-gen operations. And, perhaps most important of all, the human factor. The U.S. pilots had performed flawlessly. These weren't just button pushers. They were elite warriors, trained in dogfighting, electronic warfare, and rapid combat adaptation. One young captain, flying his 4th real-world mission, summarized it best in his debrief. We were already inside their decision loop. By the time they thought of moving, we were pulling out. That level of supremacy, once theoretical, had now been executed in real time. American aerospace engineering had met tactical perfection, and the world had seen the result. For Iran, recovery would take years, not just rebuilding runways and hangars, but trust, coordination, and military confidence. Their most fortified sites had been shown to be vulnerable. Their airspace no longer secure. Their radar outdated. And for other hostile actors watching, the lesson was simple. Provoke the eagle and expect the talons. In every corner of the globe where American forces stood ready, South Korea, Japan, NATO borders, Pacific Islands, the morale lifted. The myth that America's edge had dulled was shattered. And deep within that night sky, where the roar of engines had faded and the clouds closed around the vapor trails, the 12 jets returned home, silent, victorious, and ready for whatever came next. This wasn't just a strike. It was a statement, etched into the landscape, carried on the wind, and burned into the minds of every nation. America flies faster, hits harder, and sees farther than anyone else on Earth. And when 12 of its finest warriors take the sky, the world changes in under an hour. As dawn broke over the Persian Gulf, What remained was not just the smoldering ruins of Iranian air defense sites and radar facilities, but a global realization that a new era of air warfare had fully arrived, dominated not just by stealth or speed, but by the intricate and seamless fusion of strategy, data, and technological supremacy. Across military intelligence boards worldwide, analysts updated threat matrices, doctrine papers, and combat scenario simulators, because what the United States had unleashed with those 12 fighters wasn't just an attack, it was a doctrine come to life. Instant response, surgical execution, total electronic supremacy. Those 12 jets, a mixture of F-22 Raptors and stealth-enhanced F-35s, had never even shown up on radar, confirmed by post-strike Iranian debriefs, intercepted communications, and even stunned regional military observers. No warning, no scrambling of interceptors, no time for defensive posture, and perhaps most shocking of all, no casualties on the American side. The mission had been so precise, so flawlessly coordinated, that all aircraft returned with full operational capability, having neutralized their primary, secondary, and tertiary targets within a narrow window that left even the most advanced enemy response systems effectively useless. And what happened in the shadows beyond the public spectacle of explosions and satellite images was even more telling, because while Iranian forces scoured impact zones for answers, U.S. cyber teams were already inside critical infrastructure, sowing confusion, corrupting communications, and copying strategic data that would take decades for Iran to recover from. The scale of the victory wasn't just military, it was psychological. Regional powers who once flirted with aggression recalibrated instantly. The world watched as a superpower demonstrated restraint, precision, and power in the same breath. Meanwhile, on American soil, the mood wasn't one of celebration but confirmation. Every taxpayer dollar invested into stealth technology, AI-guided weapons, and pilot training had just paid off in front of a watching world. In briefings to the National Security Council, it was confirmed that more than 97% of targeted enemy assets had been destroyed, disabled, or rendered non-operational in under 7 minutes. That kind of effectiveness hadn't been seen in warfare before. Not in World War II, not in the Gulf War, not even in the drone campaigns of the 2010s. This was surgical dominance in the modern age. But what came next sent an even stronger message. Instead of escalating, the United States began pulling some forces back, not in retreat, but in a carefully choreographed pivot. Intelligence confirmed the enemy was stunned, fractured, and divided, and now was the perfect time to shift from air assault to diplomacy backed by irrefutable power. U.S. aircraft carriers repositioned with precision. USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Dwight D. Eisenhower stood guard just within strike range, their decks bustling with activity, while radar domes scanned every inch of the horizon. And from the skies above the Gulf, new surveillance satellites were launched from Vandenberg and Cape Canaveral, their orbits pre-planned to monitor every square foot of the region with 24/7 infrared and thermal coverage. Meanwhile, underground in Colorado Springs and classified bunkers across the U.S., generals reviewed footage from the strike, every missile launch, every evasive maneuver, every laser-guided impact. And from those hours of data came the future. Engineers immediately began simulations for the next wave of improvements. Hypersonic stealth payloads, AI-coordinated swarm drones, and Neuralink pilot interfaces that would further shrink decision lag to near zero. For Iran, the reality hit harder than any bomb, because despite their billions in Russian and Chinese defense partnerships, their systems had proven brittle, outdated, and slow. No one expected 12 jets to cripple an entire region of their defense network, but that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't luck. It was doctrine. It was readiness. It was America proving once again that when the time comes, its might doesn't just arrive. It overwhelms, it neutralizes, and it vanishes before the dust settles. And for those who question whether U.S. air superiority had declined, this strike was a definitive answer. No aircraft was lost. No pilot injured. No objective failed. And as Navy SEALs landed hours later to confirm post-strike targets and collect high-value intel, they found more than destroyed radar stations. They uncovered blueprints of planned operations against American allies, missile trajectories meant for Israel and Saudi Arabia, and storage sites holding next-gen drone prototypes funded by foreign adversaries. Within hours, Those blueprints were being analyzed in Washington, London, and Tel Aviv, building an international case against further Iranian military escalation. In a single move, the U.S. had not only neutralized the threat, but built diplomatic momentum that turned outrage into unity. And the message to the world was crystal clear. The skies are not equal, and America's wings still cast the longest shadow. While world media ran headlines with phrases like shock strike and midnight thunder, inside the Department of Defense, the operation had a different name, Iron Echo. And true to its name, the echoes of that operation would ring across generations of defense strategy. From Air Force academies in Colorado to strategy war rooms at NATO headquarters, Iron Echo would become a case study in fast strike dominance, unmatched logistics, and the execution of modern warfare with zero margin of error. And as the sun rose over hangars back home, those 12 jets sat refueled, rearmed, and ready, unseen by enemies, but never unprepared. This wasn't just a warning shot. It was a masterstroke. And if there was any doubt before about who controlled the skies, it was erased in a single night when 12 U.S. fighter jets struck at once and Iran never saw it coming.